Hey, welcome to Exchange. Look at the pain at the pump, aka gasoline prices, why it costs so much, and why prices might be coming down in the near future. So first things first, national average of gasoline across the U.S. right now is $4.26 a gallon. Obviously, it's pricier on the West Coast and the East Coast. Central U.S. is actually much cheaper. This is a very normal trend across the board. And really, the answer for this is really simple. If you look at the pipeline map, it almost mirrors inversely the actual price map. So you see a pipeline's heavy in Central U.S., basically the flyover states. That's where all our pipelines are at. Whereas the East Coast and West Coast are pretty barren. Even though there are refineries out there on the East Coast and West Coast, your concentration of refineries really is in the Gulf states right here in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi down there. Really no surprise there. But this is really why gas is pricier to move. It's just more expensive on the coast. Now, an obvious solution for this is why don't we just ship oil from the Gulf states via ships, to New York City or to basically East Coast ports. And really, that gets down to the Jones Act. The Jones Act is basically a 100-year-old protectionist kind of policy. And the idea there is you have to have an American crude vessel, American-owned vessel, and American flagged vessel, which obviously means higher cost bases across the board. So it's actually cheaper for these coastal cities to actually ship their oil in internationally from foreign suppliers, bring it in domestically to U.S. ports from there, because the Jones Act makes it so pricey to actually ship the oil domestically, basically from Houston to New York City, for example. Now, the question is, why do we still have this act? It's 100 years old. I mean, the Jones Act's been around, for decades and decades with revisions and everything else too. But I mean, really, it's protecting jobs. They're really protectionist in its kind of philosophy. It's about 500,000 plus jobs, basically domestic shipping jobs. That are very important. And we're talking billions of dollars of actual trade domestically, basically domestic port to domestic port happening, almost every day. So that's really the idea behind the policy. Now, it might change, though, too. I mean, there's definitely been some headwinds in Congress being like, hey, let's get rid of this and actually potentially drop, oil prices across the board for both the West Coast and the East Coast. Now, next thing I want to answer on this is what actually makes up the cost of a gallon of gasoline at the pump. Is it actually pure price gouging? Are they just getting rich off this? Is this pure profit, etc.? So this is from California Energy Commission. This is one of their breakdowns they do, which I think is fantastic. It basically breaks down the branded versus unbranded gas stations at a cost per gallon. So you see right here, the full retail price in California is $5.59 for branded, $5.59 for unbranded. It basically breaks down the cost right here. So going from the very top, we'll go to the very bottom. So distribution cost, marketing, and this is the actual profit, the actual retail gas station. If you look at there, 61 cents, basically all of that full cost baked in. Crude oil costs $2.50. It's not that much. It's about 45% of the total baseline of the entire cost of gasoline for California. So for most states, California's a pretty high tax state, but for most states, it's roughly about half the cost of a gallon is actually the crude oil price themselves right there. Refinery costs is basically taken from crude oil to actual refined gasoline. There's a cost and profit there too, about $1.65 per gallon. Storage underground fees, 2 cents. State local taxes, 12 cents. State excise taxes is almost like a tax on gasolines themselves, and it'll vary from state to state. Some states are very cheap, like Texas. Some are very high, like California. California is a very high overall state excise tax. Now, federal excise taxes is a federal tax across the board. It doesn't matter which state you're in. You pay the 18.4 cents per gallon across the board. You combine all it up vertically, you basically get the $5.59 per gallon for branded stores. So this is on the website. It's from EAI.gov, Energy Information Administration. It basically breaks down the federal taxes for gasoline and average state tax. So average state's 31 cents. The federal tax is a flat rate, 18.4 cents. This is a graph, so it's basically showing the breakdown by state. Basically, the darker the color is, the higher the tax is overall for state taxes. The lighter shade is, it's basically cheaper. So you see Alaska, basically 9 cents a gallon, super cheap. I mean, California, 50, 60 cents plus. I mean, really the southern states are pretty cheap across the board. But really you see the north and the east coast and west coast are kind of your priciest states across the board. So this is the Excel spreadsheet. It's from EAI.gov. Same thing, basically breaks down state taxes by state. So what we look at here is state taxes for this column D for total state tax. You see the average there, 31 cents. But you can really break it down by state and really see what's going on. So you see right here, California, 58.8 cents per gallon, one of the highest in nations right there. You see again Illinois, 58 cents as well too. But you can scroll down and see states like Texas. I mean, it's 0.2 cents, or basically like 20 cents per gallon. I mean, absolute rock bottom prices. Look, Oklahoma, 0.2 cents as well, too. Pennsylvania is another of the hot ones, too, along with Illinois and California. 58 cents is the total state tax. But this might change, too. I mean, you're seeing state by state. Some states are actually proposing state tax holidays on gasoline prices to help out consumers at the pump. The federal tax holiday, this idea of getting rid of this 18 cents a gallon for consumers, it may not happen. The odds are looking like right now no, but state by state there might be relief in sight for some of these states. It depends on your state if they're actually going to propose that or not too. But some states are definitely in the process of that right now. So this is from NBC News, came out over the weekend. And so Maryland and Georgia are announcing gas tax holidays as a federal effort to stall in Congress. Remember, federal efforts is at 18 cents a gallon. So even a federal tax holiday is not that much, at the pump. Whereas a state by state, it could be a lot. It could be 40, 50, maybe even almost 60 cents a gallon, which that's a lot of help for consumers across the board. Again, these are not, Maryland and Georgia are not super tax heavy states for gasoline. But again, any help is needed, and it'll definitely help out. But so that's all pretty bad news across the board. But really, what's the good news here? Looking at this, we haven't seen those European sanctions actually hit Russia oil just yet. It might be happening in the future, but potentially led by Germany because they're one of the biggest importers of Russian oil. But it's definitely been changing. It's definitely been shifted. So too, even on the weekend we saw this. So the Iranian nuclear deal is what I pulled up here. This came out on Friday. The talks are going very well, and potentially it might happen again. Which this nuclear deal is one aspect though, but the really big other aspect is pulling off sanctions off Iranian oil. Which, look at the Russian right now. Basically, proactive sanctions from European partners, etc. It's roughly about 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day of basically crude oil that's basically been sanctioned off across the board. In the U.S. right now alone, we're seeing about 250,000 barrels per day of basically uptick as domestic producers basically increase their production across the board. There's not that much slack there. We're not going to see like a multi-million barrel increase in U.S. domestic production. We might see a little uptick in the Saudis or UAE potentially, but there might be tapped out there too. There may not be much slack there across the board. But this Iran deal is definitely a huge positive trend right there. So the big thing we want to look at here is what they're saying is by April, May timeframe, so literally a matter of weeks, they could have 500,000 barrels of oil basically per day, into the market right there. Potentially by year end, have 1.3 million barrels per day, which it's not going to cover the entire shortfall of the Russian kind of proactive sanctions, gap right there. But this is over 2/3 of the way potentially to that filling that gap. So any kind of uptick in production or loss of demand globally, this could basically match out supply and demand, which hopefully should be price. Prices may not come down, but they'll at least be very stable around the mark they're at right now. Hey, definitely let me know your thoughts on this one. This is a very, obviously, top of mind issue for most American consumers, but if you think prices are going to drop, definitely let me know. I think Ukraine war, unless there's a nuclear strike or chemical weapon strike, there's not going to be much of a change in crude oil prices. I think they're somewhat stabilized around the current, 100, 105, 110 level. We saw a big spike last week, but I don't think it's going to last that much longer. But yeah, that's really all I have. Definitely let me know your thoughts, definitely let me know your questions, and that's the exchange.